we go. And I will go ahead and share my screen. Bismillah. Welcome everybody this evening to ISLA and Noorart's webinar on the puberty conversation, practical guidance for Muslim educators. And it's an honor to have Amber Khan here today. And I will now start sharing my screen. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. Like a thumbs up if you can see it.
Yes, I can.
Yay. Thank you. Okay. So we are the Islamic Schools League of America. We support over 120 full-time Islamic schools throughout the country, over 100,000 Muslim students, over 9,000 educational professionals, including the wonderful educators like yourself who are with us today. And we do research, resources, and relationships. So we're so excited to have you join us today. Our impact, again, we have over 434 schools on our directory. If your school is not on it, please add it. We have over 143 active school members as of today, over 40 active corporate members, 5,200 followers on social media. In the past month, our programs included 600 attendees from two sponsored programs, 400 participants in ISLA activities, as well as 80 educational organizations represented in those activities, including 12 sponsors or partners. So we love to collaborate. We love to be out in the communities. So very excited to be partnering today with Noorart. Recently, last weekend, we did hold the ISLA Research Symposium with educators and researchers from across the world presenting their findings as it related to Islamic school learning and some ideas and suggestions for how that learning could make a better day in the schools that we work in. So if you want those resources, scan the QR code. It is available if you missed the symposium. Monthly, we do have a school administrator meetup for those with school members. So we invite you, if you're a school leader from a member school, please join us next week, Wednesday, May 13th at 12 p.m. noon Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, 9 a.m. Pacific. And join us. Welcome. We will also, end of the summer, be having Youth Mental Health First Aid, a training. It's another training. We just finished one last week, but due to demand, we'll be bringing back Care Collective to have this important training offered again. The details we posted on our events page shortly, but keep that in mind. We'll also be having our famous Professional Development Week 2026, August 3rd through 7th, a whole week of virtual professional development, morning and afternoon, 5 days, 10 sessions, all to prepare you for the back to school, whether it's August or September. And it's a very low priced, very affordable to make sure all educators in schools that would benefit are able to take part and get high quality PD for your schools and yourself. So again, save the date, put a tag in your calendar or follow us on social media to find out the more details. We will also be having a leadership retreat this winter. December, it'll be back again at the DNet Center of America in Maryland. I know somebody joined it for Maryland, so hopefully you're able to join us. Again, the event details we posted shortly. And please follow us on social media. We normally have several posts a week, uplifting schools, our partners, our corporate members, and important information, news, and statistics happening in the educational world. So follow us. And then our guest for today, the reason you're all here, is Dr. Amber Khan, author of Health and Wellness from the Islamic Perspective. A little bit about Dr. Amber. Her more robust resume would fill several pages, I believe. But she graduated from the West Virginia School of Osteopathic Medicine. And then she pursued health education and has served as a Muslim youth health educator since 2010. So, mashallah, 16 years. She teaches in schools and community centers, covering physical, social, mental, reproductive, and sexual health. She has been chair of the Education Committee for the Islamic Medical Association of North America, IMANA, since 2015, and a community educator for the Family and Youth Institute since 2021. She authored the first Muslim youth health curriculum, Health and Wellness from the Islamic Perspective, a 6-level book series available on Noorart.com since October 2023. She also holds an associate degree in Islamic studies from Mishka University. It's our pleasure to have her here today. Just a disclaimer for those of you that may have young children or kids in the area, there will be some explicit use of words and images during this presentation since it's on puberty. So please be mindful that your screen is not visible to younger students or younger children. All right, so thank you so much. I will now stop sharing and turning over to Dr. Amber. So. And if you're talking, Dr. Amber, we do not hear you.
Okay, I'm just getting started. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Just making sure.
Thank you. Alhamdulillah wa sallallahu rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Firstly, I would like to thank the ISLA team as well as Noorart for organizing today's webinar today. I'd also like to thank all of you, parents and educators, for being here this evening to discuss a very important and much needed topic of understanding, which is the puberty conversation. Now, there is a lot of information when it comes to puberty, and we do have an hour slot. So I may not be able to go into too much detail, but the ISLA team and I, we did discuss that if there is an interest amongst the Islamic schools as well as parents here, that if you would be interested in doing a more in-depth discussion on puberty, we'd be happy to arrange a series. So if that would be something of interest to you, please reach out to the ISLA team, and perhaps that could be something we coordinate in the future. Now, as Sister Lisa mentioned, just a short disclaimer before we get started. Some of this content may be considered explicit, and so we have organized it in a way that it's only appropriate for those of the ages 10 and older. So just make sure that for any younger children, that they're not listening or viewing the screen if you have any concerns about that type of exposure. As Sister Lisa mentioned, I am the author of the Health and Wellness book series. This is a 6-level book series that includes a different array of topics, of health-related topics, including puberty. All of the information from today's webinar is coming from this book series. So if you have any interest or if you'd like to check it out, please reach out or please check out the noorart.com website for more information. Now, we are going to be discussing puberty, and we're going to basically organize this webinar in terms of why talk about puberty, how can we talk about puberty, and what type of topics are considered under the puberty category. So in other words, the why, the how, and the what. We will also be looking at how to have this discussion at different age levels. So the elementary level, the middle school level, as well as the high school level. And I also understand that there are educators as well as parents here. So we will discuss this in terms of in a classroom setting, or if we're talking about other settings such as a halakha environment, homeschooling, or simply at home between a parent and a child. The school life and the home life is really meant to be a symbiotic relationship. And so we want to make sure that puberty is an ongoing discussion. It's not solely held in one area or another. So let's go ahead and first go into the why. Now, some schools and some Islamic institutions, as well as parents, there may be this reluctancy to teach health-related topics. And it could be coming from certain types of personal feelings of this could be shameful to discuss, or it could be improper. I don't know how to tackle this type of conversation. And for some people, it may be this fear of, well, I don't want to encourage early type of activities, sexual activities, for example. So I don't want to really introduce the topic. If I don't talk about it, then it's something where it can enable the child to kind of stay at a certain type of mental age range. Educating our youth, it is an amana. It's part of their upbringing. In tarbiyah, it is strongly includes teaching children about puberty. It's considered to be a crucial, proactive duty for parents to teach these matters or to send their children to someone or to a school, for example, whether it's an Islamic school, a weekend school, or a halakha, so that they can learn it properly. Now, the question is why? Why teach Muslim youth about puberty? Why is it a part of our tarbiyah? There's a lot of reasons why, and I'll just address a few here within the time that we have. Is one of the reasons why puberty is so important to talk about is that it can instill a healthy foundation. During the upper elementary or early middle school years, before even going through puberty, we really want to prepare our youth for the journey of puberty. So we're kind of setting an environment that we're going to talk about these things together in an age-appropriate manner. And this is not shameful. This is meant to prepare you for something that is biologically expected to occur. And then, inshallah, as they get older into their teen years, they may be more likely to turn to you as a teacher or a parent for questions. They may feel less closed off because you've already opened the door. When we avoid this topic, they may feel we can't turn to you or that you've inadvertently made it clear to them that these are not topics that we can talk about together. And in one of the health classes that I teach, one of the high school health classes, out of the 22 students, only 2 of them shared that they've had some type of puberty or sex education within their home. That for a majority of the students, that they said that they really learn it from the internet, from their peers, or from the media. And this really does align with the research that we've been finding. Dr. Sobia Ali Faisal, she did a survey amongst Muslim adults. And when she asked them about what their sex education was when they were younger, the participants in the study found, they reported that their greatest source of sex education was from the media, and that their least likely source was from their parents. And when they looked at Islamic institutions, they found that less than about 4% received some sex education from some type of Islamic institution, whereas a majority of their sex education came from a secularized environment, such as a public school. And so we see that when we have a healthy foundation and we're able to discuss it, it helps our youth develop and become much more knowledgeable, as opposed to when we ignore the conversation or we rely solely on secular sources to share information, but it doesn't comprise of that Islamic component. Another reason is that our faith talks a lot about body boundaries. There's verses in the Quran, for example, that talk about before a child hitting puberty, that they're to knock on their parents' door at 3 specific times in the day, the times when parents may be changing or maybe alone together. And then as they get older, closer to age 10, they're to seek permission at all times. And there's also hadith like the one mentioned from the Prophet ﷺ that talks about when children reach a certain age that we're to separate them in their bedding, that they're to have a separate space to sleep. These types of hadith and verses and more, they signify body boundaries, body protection, the discussion of privacy, and also understanding that there may be ill intention by other people. Islam is the only faith that talks about body boundaries and consent. And we really don't acknowledge or take advantage of this enough when it comes to discussing it in an Islamic health environment. So this is some of the things that we can use to these verses and these hadith that we can tackle and we can discuss when we have these discussions of puberty. And just a side note here is that there are a lot of resources available in modern times, in today's time, that can help us supplement those discussions that can be quite heavy at an age-appropriate level. And you'll be given these resources, inshallah, at the end of this discussion. Just wanted to share this with you here. A third reason why is that talking about puberty can really enhance our child's confidence. Every child will experience puberty differently. And for most youth, it's natural for puberty to feel awkward or a little bit uncomfortable. But some youth, they may really find puberty particularly difficult. And those who tend to find it difficult usually are the social and emotional changes that come with puberty that can be very overwhelming. And those types of youth, they really do need a lot of support from teachers as well as from parents. A trusted adult who can discuss topics of puberty consistently, meaning not just once in a while, but an ongoing basis, particularly the emotional and mental effects, it can really help them feel confident in those changes. Also, confidence can also come from just understanding certain types of Islamic issues, such as understanding the fiqh rulings of certain hygiene issues that we'll discuss later on, Islam's stance on certain social issues such as sexuality, dealing with strong emotions when we hit puberty through tazkiyah, and addressing some of the cultural stigmas and discrimination, such as the social health issues, such as dealing with racism or other types of issues. And the purpose of this slide is just to kind of highlight how the books of Islamic jurisprudence that reproductive and sexual health are 2 of the most heavily discussed topics. And so we can really incorporate that Islamic component when we are teaching our youth about puberty at an age-appropriate level. A fourth why is that we can fuel their curiosity. Curiosity around changing minds and bodies can really fuel youth to look for answers from unsafe and unreliable resources. So, by you as a parent or a teacher being proactive in your school or in your home, we can address these types of issues within an Islamic framework, fuel their curiosity in a safe and reliable environment, give them a space to ask questions and to learn. For example, many of my students, once we start talking about puberty, they'll say things like, well, what does Islam say about this? Or I heard Islam says we can't do this. Why not? That they start to ask and wonder about certain types of Islamic topics that they may have heard about and they want to know. And so we can fuel their curiosity even from that Islamic component. Studies show that children who receive an early health education from a trusted adult, they're more likely to avoid risky health behavior. They're more likely to make safe health choices and healthy relationships. And even from a spiritual standpoint, is that they develop more morally sound thinking when they are engaging in their decision-making skills as well. And number five, and this is not the end, but this is just some of the whys of what we're discussing tonight, is that we can combat some of the media messaging related to health and the self. Our kids are being exposed to more and more media, and they may find it confusing or not be able to understand what is true, what is not. And that includes health issues, such as dealing with unrealistic beauty standards that they're seeing online, gender stereotypes, sexualized behavior, and even mental health issues, such as cyberbullying, dealing with gossiping, such as in the comments, or dealing with envy and jealousy. So, puberty topics on social influence can also discuss debunking some of those unrealistic beauty standards, normalizing what normal changes look like in comparison to photos and images that may have edits and filtering and AI components, and building just simply media literacy around body image and certain types of spiritual diseases like arrogance and pride and envy that can be found a lot online. So this can be something in which we kind of tailor puberty within the topic of being able to discuss it from a social component. So these are some of the whys about why it is so important to talk about puberty from that Islamic perspective. In this slide, it just simply summarizes some of the risks of when we choose not to have that conversation. The youth are more likely to develop poor health and hygiene choices, increased risk of unsafe behaviors, misunderstanding consent and personal boundaries, believing false or misleading information, relying on unreliable resources or sources for answers, and staying silent instead of seeking help. So these are things that we want to avoid that inshallah providing a health education on a regular basis can provide. And finally, when we wrap up this section is I just want to highlight this wonderful quote that was found in an article by the Institute of Social Policy and Understanding. And I'll read it here that engaging youth, it starts with plugging into their stories and conversations. In the US, youth are talking about transgender issues, the legalization of marijuana in states across the country, the legalization of same-sex marriage in all 50 states. If parents and community leaders wish to help young Muslims make sense of these issues in light of normative Islamic teachings, they must address these topics head on. Muslim educators are valuable in starting these conversations. So I want you to know if you are an educator or you work with youth or you are a parent, that it is important and it's vital for us as a community, for all of us to work together to talk to our youth about puberty and health related topics, because this is where they are going to understand some of the secularized issues from that Islamic framework, inshallah. So this is a brief overview on why puberty is so important to talk about. Now, one of the whys that I didn't mention is, well, many will say, well, no, I value talking about puberty. I want to, but I just lack the training. I don't know how. And this is where we're going to get into the how do I teach puberty. This kind of sets the stage before we get into the topics of what to teach. So some practical things to keep in mind when it comes to teaching puberty is firstly the age range. Puberty occurs for many years. And so it needs to be addressed frequently, and we need to build off from the previous conversation. So when we're talking about the upper elementary level, we want to be proactive here, that many youth may not even be going through puberty yet, that they're preparing for it. So we want to let them know the changes to come. We're kind of letting them know in advance. In that middle school age range, we want to kind of, many of the youth are starting and dealing with puberty. They're curious, they're feeling awkward about it. They may have peers going through it. They may be going through it. And so this is really when we want to talk about those physical changes and address some of the emotional changes like peer relationships, gender interactions. And then at the high school level, this is where we want to advance the puberty topics to being more mature, that we want to cover some of the struggles that they may be dealing with from a desire standpoint or their understanding based on the world around them, some of the things that they are seeing on a worldly level in the media, and how they can understand that and how it may affect their health. So this is a way in which we kind of break up the topics by age. Gender, of course, is by separating the gender and having a same gender teacher discuss these particular topics. And we're talking about it in a school setting. This would be different in a home setting. A permission slip that as a school, if you are going to teach puberty, one of the things I highly recommend is that you let the parents know in advance, that you send a permission slip home, you let them know you're going to have a health seminar or you're going to be offering a health class. These are some of the topics that are going to be discussed, and that the parents sign it as well as the student. So this is kind of for the everyone has that consent and that awareness of what is being discussed. If parents choose not to sign it, if they choose to opt out, then it's not just leaving it at that, but follow up with them is what is your alternative? What are some concerns that you have? Can we have a discussion and share with me some of the things you're worried about? Or at least if this is something you want to do at home or something you want to do between your child, then can I share some resources with you to help you? So we don't want to just kind of leave them off, but we also want to make sure that we kind of reassure them if they have any issues. Maintaining haya. This is if you are a teacher and you're going to be teaching puberty related topics, is to be mindful of their age. Don't be too graphic. Be aware that some topics can be quite triggering. Inform students if you're going to be using anatomically correct terms or proper medical terms. And so maintaining that haya in the classroom. And then finally here is what resources are you going to use? How are you going to teach puberty? What particular books or videos or articles are you going to utilize in the classroom? Are they age appropriate? Are they aligning with Islamic teachings? Maybe you want to play certain types of games and you want to make sure that they're appropriate for your children, for your students. Perhaps offering an anonymous question box so that students can put in their questions and you can address them in a manner where it maintains their privacy. So these are some things to think about when it comes to how to teach puberty. Now let's get into the what. What actually is the topics of puberty? What are certain things that we should discuss? And perhaps we'll kind of go into the how as we go into the what here. Puberty, it is a transformation from a child into an adult. It can take several years and it can feel kind of out of control or scary, but also exciting. Now, for girls, they typically go through puberty, usually beginning somewhere around the ages of either 9 to 14. Boys may start a little bit later, between the ages of 11 and 16. So we're seeing this range in an age where some youth may be dealing with it earlier than others or later than others, but there's many changes that are occurring in this time frame. Now, most youth and adults, when we think about puberty, we tend to focus solely on the physical changes. But puberty also includes mental and spiritual changes as well. So when we have the discussion of puberty, we want to make sure that we're including all three areas in the discussion. We're going to go through each of these individually. And let's start off with the physical changes. The physical changes basically break down into two categories. There's the secondary sex characteristics, which I'll define in a minute, and then there is fertility. The secondary sex characteristics are typically the things that you think about when you think the changes of puberty on a physical level. So this is what would transform a girl to start looking like a woman or a boy to start looking like a man. And these changes, they follow a specific order called Tanner stages. And you can see here on this slide, and if it's a little bit blurry, this is found in the book series. I just wanted to share it here as a reference, that you'll have the age ranges and the staging and what's going on in each stage. So for the boy to man transformation, we're seeing in the first stage, they're having hormonal changes from the brain. Eventually, they will then develop reproductive organ growth. Their voice may change, their muscles are growing, they're increasing in height. They're continuing to have reproductive organ growth. They'll also start to see body hair, pubic hair, armpit hair, and then eventually facial hair. On the girl side, the girl to woman side, there's some similarity here. We see that it's happening at an earlier age, but we're also seeing the release of hormones. We're seeing breast development, pubic hair and armpit hair, hips and thighs developing in fat, increase in height, also the menstrual period, and then the continuation of reproductive growth as well. So these are the main changes, and we can show this to the upper elementary level. We don't necessarily have to show them a chart like this, but we can kind of introduce the idea at an age-appropriate level of this is what puberty is, and these are some of the changes that are expected to happen within the next few years. And that some may start having these changes earlier than others, but it's all considered normal and it will happen at the time that Allah wills. So this is some of the certain changes that we can also introduce them to as well. In the middle school, we can also mention this as well. They'll be going through it at this point, so we can offer more detail, perhaps showing them this chart may be helpful or a chart similar to this, mentioning some of the specific changes and explaining the why, that hormones are what's causing these changes. Another thing to mention to the middle schoolers is that while the hormones are causing these changes, that the hormones are also have certain side effects. For example, as you're going through these changes, the surge of hormones may also lead to acne. That acne is an excessive oil on the face. It can also be on the chest, the back, or other body parts, and it could lead to a formation of a pustule. And talking to them about certain things that they can do to help clear their acne, talking to a dermatologist as well, especially if you are a parent at home and your child may have concerns about feeling self-conscious or anxious about some of the acne that they might be developing. We want to kind of keep in mind the emotional impact that the physical changes of puberty can have. And so letting them know that there are certain things that one can do to relieve them or to help prevent acne. Another effect of the hormonal change is body odor. That the surge of puberty hormones can lead to excessive sweating, which can also lead to a breakdown in bacteria, which can release an odor. And this is something that once puberty is done, once it is kind of getting to a close, that body odor and acne tend to subside or, kind of decrease quite a bit. But while someone is going through it, that there are certain things that one can do. When it comes to body odor, it's that once you start going through puberty, showering daily may be something that you need to do if you aren't doing it before. Wearing cotton clothing, wearing deodorant, just that good hygiene overall is something that one needs to start developing now that they are in puberty. Other things to keep in mind are personal grooming habits, such as trimming the pubic hair and the armpit hair once it starts becoming coarse. For some youth, once they start developing, it may be quite fine and soft, but once it starts becoming coarse, then from an Islamic framework is that this hair is to be trimmed. And talking to their parents, not doing it on their own, but having a conversation with their parents on the safest way to do this, learning how to do it to avoid certain infections or cuts or ingrown hairs, and that one should have a routine where they're doing this, about every month or so, as mentioned from the Sunnah. So these are the secondary sex characteristics. The second major change of the physical changes is the development of fertility. And this really is a topic that one can begin in that middle school time period. And this addresses the why. Why are we going through these changes? What's happening internally? What's happening inside my body? Fertility, and it's important to explain what fertility is to our middle schoolers here, is that fertility means being able to have a baby one day, and your body is now able to produce, inshallah, one day. A major stage of puberty is that development of fertility, and that there's physical signs that let you know that your body is becoming fertile. And one of the ways that can be helpful to our youth to understand this better is for them to actually understand the reproductive system in their body. And we'll start with males here, is that when we talk to our male youth, our male middle schoolers, when it comes to fertility, is we show them what the reproductive anatomy looks like and using certain types of images that maintain that hayab but can point to the organs and name them medically so that way they know anatomically where they're located and medically what they're termed. That they don't need to say the words, but providing a vocab list, for example, of some of the important words can be helpful so you can point to them or they can point to them, but at least they can visually see them and understand the conversation. And some of the ways of having this conversation is explaining to them that their body is now developing sperm. That once a boy reaches puberty, his body starts making sperm. And sperm are the tiny cells that can carry their DNA to make a baby one day, inshallah. One of the signs of sperm production is the release of a fluid called semen. And this may occur in the middle of the night, which is known as a nocturnal emission or a wet dream. And if this happens to you, this is a sign that your body is becoming fertile. This is, in other words, this means that you, inshallah, will be able to have a baby one day. And then talking about the process of where a baby comes from. That a baby comes from a joining of sperm, and then the cell that is found in the female is called the egg. And they join together when the private parts come together during sexual intercourse. That this is an act that is permissible in a marriage, and this is what enables a baby to be made. So, kind of talking about it from that biological framework that in order for a baby to be made, it must come from a male and a female, not two males or not two females. And then kind of going into other discussions such as the private organ becoming enlarged, as well as the terms for the release of the fluid. That way they are familiar with what those terms mean. And as we get higher up into the upper middle school, is talking to them about the different types of fluid that might be released, which fluids require ghusl, such as the release of semen, and then knowing how to perform ghusl. So talking to them about what this process is and when this is to occur. That if this happens, that this is considered a major ritual impurity. That a wet dream, for example, that this is not something anyone is held accountable for. This is happening in your unconscious state. And so if this happens, or if you find this and you wake up, then perform ghusl so that way you can, when you pray, when it is time to pray. Advanced upper middle school, high school level, you can kind of grow on this topic and start talking about certain types of male reproductive illnesses or certain types of injuries that they should be aware of. And so, especially if they have certain types of questions about this. Now we'll move on to the females here. Very similarly, with our middle school females is showing them what the female reproductive system looks like. That this is what the reproductive system looks like, some of the terminology as well, that in puberty that females are born with eggs, but it's not until puberty where the eggs get to leave the ovary, which is where they're located, and they will enter the fallopian tube. And it is there where they will wait for sperm. That sperm is a sex cell that comes from the males, and that if sexual intercourse takes place, this is when the male and female private organs come together, and if sperm is released in the female, then that sperm will search for an egg. If the sperm finds the egg and sperm will join together, and then they will attach or cling to the uterus. That the uterine lining is created once a month at the same time that the egg is released from the ovary. And now that egg and sperm can cling to it, as Allah mentions in Surah Al-Alaq, that it's like a leech-like clot. And there it will grow as a baby. So this is really eye-opening for a lot of middle schoolers as they develop this understanding about where a baby's coming from, where it is growing in the baby. Where it is growing in the body. Then when we talk about, well, if an egg is being released, but there is no sperm that is being released into the female, what's going to happen to that egg and that lining? That they have a time limit of about 30 days, that has to be released, and that is what menstruation is. Menstruation is the release of the unfertilized egg and the uterine lining that nothing attached to. Then talking to them about what the menstrual cycle is, that the menstrual phase is that unfertilized egg and lining leaving the body. The follicular phase is the egg and lining regrowing again. The ovulatory phase is when they are made, and this is the best and most opportune time for a married couple to have a baby if they want to. The luteal phase is if one is not engaging in intercourse, there is no sperm being released, then that egg and lining is going to get ready to leave the body. And many females will develop symptoms in the luteal phase that give them an idea that their period is coming. that those symptoms are called PMS or premenstrual symptoms. And there's a lot of symptoms that you may experience that let you know that your period is coming. So talking to them about some of those symptoms and how to deal with those symptoms. And also them taking ownership of those feelings. That just because you have these symptoms, it doesn't mean that you have the right to treat people a certain way, that you need to be attuned to your own body and know that maybe these couple of days, this is a time in which I need to interact less with people, or I need to have better control of my emotions during this time. Of course, then is moving on to certain types of products. For the middle school is focusing on external protection such as pads. And a lot of the high school girls will have questions about the internal protection, tampons and cups, and just focusing and highlighting to them that from a medical standpoint, that these are products that one needs to be aware that there are certain risks that come with using these. So one needs to be very attuned to their body to know when these items need to be removed, what happens if one is unable to remove them, how to insert them. And then, of course, talking to their parents about their comfort level on if they even want their daughter using these products, which becomes a very common question that older females tend to have. Then, of course, is the discussion on the fiqh of menstruation, talking to them about this is a biological component. This is something that Allah has deemed for the daughters of Adam, as the Prophet ﷺ mentions in the hadith. And some of the prohibited acts of menstruation, such as prayer and fasting, which is by consensus, touching the mushaf, many scholars saying that one can use a barrier, sitting inside the musalla, meaning that one can sit inside, but once the adhan is called or the aqama is called and the rows are being made, that those who are menstruating are to give space for the others who are praying and to remove themselves. Other aspects as well as you can build upon as the girls are getting older. And then, of course, is the discussion of ghusl. One last area is that a lot of female youth, even at the middle school level, will ask questions about vaginal discharge. That this is something that they'll notice is that they are experiencing as they're going through puberty. And kind of this slide just kind of shows them that vaginal discharge is normal, that this is something that, it's actually a sign of a healthy growth in the private area, and that if anyone has any symptoms outside of these or discomfort, they can let their doctor know. And then, of course, is that fixed standpoint of knowing that discharge is a normal part of the female biology, and so it doesn't break wudu if it happens. As girls are getting older at the high school level, one can then go into certain types of common female reproductive illnesses. So I know I kind of went through that a little bit quickly here. This is something that we can definitely discuss more in depth, even give sessions on individually for males and females if that'd be something you'd be interested in. But this is just an idea of the certain types of topics to talk about on the physical level. I'd like to move on to the mental so we can have some time for questions at the end here. So when it comes to the mental changes of puberty, as I mentioned, many people will focus on the physical, but the mental and then the spiritual, these are really the most important aspects of puberty. And these are discussions that we as parents and teachers need to be having ongoing in our halakas, in our Islamic studies classes. We really want to tailor an Islamic studies program, for example, in middle school and high school around some of these mental changes, because this is really what our youth are going through. Certain types of mental changes may include learning how to make good choices, being responsible, wanting to be more independent. That at this particular age range, youth are really gravitating away from family approval and more towards peer approval. One of the major mental changes of puberty is the development of sexual attraction. Telling our youth this is normal, this is natural, this is an expected part of puberty, lets them know that this is something which may be uncomfortable for them to be dealing with or very new, but this is just a part of the biological makeup of puberty. Now, acting upon it is permitted within the bounds of marriage between a man and a woman. And until that point, we are to take responsibility for these feelings. So as we are getting older, when we hit puberty, is that our dynamic, our relationship with the opposite gender is going to start changing here. And this is an acronym that was made by MAS, by the Muslim American Society, and it's PPL. That this is an acronym that we can use and we can teach our youth that now that you are hitting puberty, that your interactions with the opposite gender are to be in public, and that includes in the digital world as well, that there needs to be a purpose to the conversation, right? If it's about homework or you're working on a project or it's something, where there is a need and a purpose to having this conversation. The Prophet ﷺ would interact with many non-Mahram women when it came to answering their questions or teaching them about Islam. And we see that as well with the wives of the Prophet ﷺ. And then finally, is that the interaction should be limited, meaning it shouldn't be happening often, but also limited in terms of lowering the gaze, having body boundaries, also is maintaining a modesty, not just in outer appearance, but also inner appearance, right? The way that you're talking, the way that you're standing, the way you're interacting. That this is going to be a distinction now that you are hitting puberty. As our youth are also getting older, when we hit that upper middle school, high school level, is this understanding that, and we talked about when we talked about fertility as the purpose of, engaging in sexual acts is to produce a child. This is really when they're getting a little bit older now that we want to highlight that sexual acts is not just for reproduction, right? That there also is a pleasure aspect as well. That Islam promotes and encourages engaging in sexual acts when one is married. That we are not a faith that promotes celibacy. But getting married and enjoying one's spouse is an act from the Sunnah. But until that time, until one is at that stage where they can get married, we have to control these feelings, and that is an individual responsibility. So these are discussions we can have at the upper middle school, high school level in terms of the importance of teaching our youth, the importance of lowering the gaze, such as the story of Al-Fadl, the young man who the Prophet taught him when he was staring at a woman, that he turned his face away, teaching him that this is your individual responsibility. Maintaining that inner and outer modesty, fasting, as the Prophet said, that young men among you who can afford it, let him get married, for it helps him to lower the gaze and protects his chastity. But whoever cannot, let him fast, for it is a protection. This is something in which we really want to encourage and teach our youth that they should be fasting regularly, maybe once a week or a couple times a month in your Islamic school or Islamic institutions, encouraging this of our youth, that this is something in which can really help them control those desires, and it's an act from the Sunnah. Choosing good company, surrounding yourself with friends who uphold to the same moral values as you, right? In this age, we'll see people with all different levels of Islam and understanding of Islam. So even if you have Muslim friends, you want to be mindful of, are they hanging out in groups with opposite gender? Are they having group chats with boys and girls in it, sharing photos? That you want to take a step back and you want to evaluate those types of interactions. As the Prophet ﷺ said, that a man follows the religion of his friend, so each one should consider whom he makes his friend. Enjoying your youthful age, that you're so much more than a person who is looking for love and fulfilling a certain type of desire. You have your own goals and aspirations, and you should strive to fulfill those. Now, a very sensitive question that a lot of youth will ask, and this is at the high school level, but also seeing this at the upper middle school level, is the discussion of, or the question of self-stimulation or masturbation. The youth will ask, what is the Islamic ruling about this? There are different opinions. The strong opinion is that it is impermissible, that engaging in a sexual act is something that should occur solely with a spouse. There is also the opinion of if it is the lesser of two evils, that one is in a state where they fear they might commit a haram act, that this is something which can relieve them of that. And then there is a minor opinion that it is disliked. One of the things that I highlight to youth, because it can be something that they may struggle with the idea of, is talking to them about how masturbation can be quite addictive. And also it tends to be joined with other haram acts, such as engaging and watching pornography, which can affect how one views sexual relationships, and it can even affect one's marriage in the future. This is a study that was done by the FYI, and it looked at Muslim youth. It surveyed several Muslim youth and found that many of them, over 59%, are dealing with viewing pornography and struggling to quit. And so it's important that our youth understand that this is a real lived reality that many youth are struggling with. There are ways that can help them, and also understanding how masturbation and viewing pornography can really negatively impact them on their daily life. Right now, it's not something that they may think can relieve them of their struggles, but actually can make things a lot more difficult. And so these are some resources that we can share with our youth or that you can share, and please view them to ensure that they are appropriate. Also is the premarital risks, such as talking to them about sexually transmitted diseases, unwanted pregnancy, the impact of casual relations, and the impact of self-worth. The spiritual risks, right? That this is something that would be haram or impermissible, that is described as being a fahisha. And then the social risks of when we live in a society that engages in premarital relations and promotes it and very much downplays the risks of it, that this does impact society at large, and acknowledging that. So this is one big aspect of the mental changes of puberty that it's important that we have this ongoing discussion with for our youth. And I didn't write specific ages for when this occurs because every community is different. For some, this may be really pertinent only at the high school level. And maybe in your community, you're thinking, no, actually, I think I need to start having these types of discussions in sixth and seventh grade. Every community is different, and youth are very much exposed at different levels, even within the same grade, because of all of that online content. So just being mindful of how to have these discussions at that appropriate level. Just moving on before we go into the spiritual changes here are some other aspects of mental changes to be aware of. Talking to our youth about self-esteem, how they feel about themselves is really impacted once they hit puberty. That self-esteem can play a big role in their peer relationships, dealing with peer pressure, wanting to fit in, this desire to wanting to be accepted by their peers. As the Prophet ﷺ kind of gave that wonderful, example of the righteous friend who is like a perfume seller, that their good qualities become your good qualities. And in contrast is somebody who works with coal, right? That their bad qualities become your bad qualities. And this really beautifully exemplifies how we should think about our friendships. So something that we can help our youth, and this is really at that middle school level, is that when you go through puberty, you may start seeing a change in your friendships. You may be moving from one friend group to another, trying to navigate and figure out who may be right for you. Some things to kind of keep in mind is when it comes to friendships is protecting your deen, right? Somebody who may be negatively influencing you, impacting you, may be a friend that you may want to distance yourself from. Protecting your trust, right? If there's friends who are gossiping or lying, or engaging in certain types of, acts that would negatively impact you in terms of their trust, then this may be a friend you also want to distance yourself from. And also is boundaries, is when it comes to chats or texts, for example, or when they see certain types of feelings being hurt, is you want to know which types of friends respect you and respect your privacy. So you want to be mindful of your company, and these are some ways that we can help our youth to think about that. Body image as well. This was a quote that mentioned that Instagram and Snapchat, which are the most visibly focused social media sources, are the worst for youth's mental health. Talking to our youth and being honest with them about certain things that they are seeing online and how that can impact them. Protecting their eyes, their time, and their heart when it comes to devices, and how to understand, when it comes to devices, that there should be conditions and boundaries around it. And this is important for parents to know, is that when you give your child a device, there should be this understanding that you are monitoring it. You know what they're looking at, you know how long they're looking at it, who they're talking to, that it's not something that we give and we let them have free range with, but it should be conditional. There should be boundaries and rules around it. There is an element of privacy we want to give our peers, but that's really different when it comes to a device for their safety. Teaching our youth about media literacy. This is a wonderful resource that I would share with educators and with parents called Common Sense Media. These are some videos that you can share in your classroom that can help talk a little bit about media safety. And this is a wonderful book. Perhaps this is, if you have a book club at your school or in your community, or a book you can read during Islamic studies, is the Fiqh of Social Media. This is a great book to do in the middle school time before they're really getting involved in social media and kind of preparing them for what it is and what lies ahead. And it's 8:50 here, so I'm just going to briefly go through some of these spiritual changes. Now, when it comes to that Islamic perspective, the spiritual changes of puberty is a major change. And this is when our deeds are now written for us, that we are now going to be responsible for the actions and the decisions that we make when we are going through or when we hit puberty. Some of the things to keep in mind is that we talk to our youth about what that accountability means when you start puberty. And some youth will think, well, puberty begins when I get my period, or puberty begins when I have a nocturnal emission. No, puberty is usually the first signs of puberty involve body hair, they involve height. For some, it may be voice changing. Therefore, it's important for them to know that puberty is a stage, it's a range. And so you want to be mindful of where your accountability really starts and begins. Taking an active role in learning about your dean, that you really now have to kind of envelope that idea of individual responsibility. That I need to, if there are certain things that I'm not sure about, or I don't know, or I don't understand, or I'm questioning, I need to take the driver's seat here, and I need to take a time to learn and understand what these rulings are. One major example, of course, is when it comes to modesty and modest dress. That garment of righteousness is the most important, but also is that understanding of, well, what do the verses mean in the Quran or the Hadith that talk about modesty for a woman, as well as modesty for a man? Why are these rulings there? What is the wisdom behind it? And how can I fulfill it? Learning the ruling is one thing, but implementing it may take time. But it's important that they take that initiative to learn what the ruling is. And then, of course, extending to other aspects of Islamic dress, such as for women involving makeup and jewelry, nails, fragrances, as well as for males in terms of facial hair and other types of issues. Learning to control their emotions, learning to control their tongue, their anger, certain desires that they have. That this doesn't mean that everyone needs to have everything figured out when they're going through puberty, but this is something that they will be dealing with their entire life. And we're not held accountable for what we don't know. But alhamdulillah, we are held accountable for choosing to stay naive and choosing not to navigate situations in accordance to what the Sunnah has required of us. And then finally, is learning how to say, I'm sorry. Learning how to take accountability for ourselves, for our actions, that when we mess up, is knowing how to be humble, how to own up to it, and learning how to apologize. Also, remembering that Allah is the most forgiving, that when we do commit a sin, as we all do, we are all the children of Adam in that manner. It's one of the qualities of the children of Adam, is that it's not about so much the quantity of the sin, but the quality of our forgiveness, is seeking forgiveness from Allah and making an effort to change. So, just in a nutshell here, these are some of the major tips when it comes to puberty and some of the topics, the physical, the mental, the spiritual changes. I hope you were able to find some benefit here. We've got a little bit of time left, and I want to make sure that I address any types of questions or comments that you have. So, at this point in time, I'll pass the mic over to you guys. Jazakallah khair.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Amber. If anybody who would like to unmute, we have a few minutes for questions, or if you'd like to put in the chat, please do so. Now, there's a lot of information, so.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum assalam.
I'm so pleased to attend today, as I'm using actually some of your books in my class, teaching science and health. So for healthy class, we are incorporating what they have in McGraw-Hill together with Islamic perspective books, and they're amazing and they're really helpful. So everybody, you should look for those books, okay?
Jazakallah khair.
I would just like to say, Jazakumullah khair, we greatly benefit a lot. We highly appreciate this intense information. May Allah reward you, may Allah accept it, inshallah. And inshallah, I would definitely check those books out.
Inshallah, I hope they're a great benefit to your community, to your school.
Inshallah.
Yes, so I have a comment here from Sister Natalia, which is that it would be good to do a professional development on these topics for teachers. Yes, I think that'd be a wonderful idea. The Noorart team, we've been actually discussing the idea of going out to different schools, going out to different sites, or at least doing webinars and leading a professional development session on teaching puberty. So if that'd be something you'd be interested in, please reach out to the Noorart team. They have their contact information directly on their website. As we close the end of the school year, there's many PD programming that occurs before the school year starts. So this could be something that we can do for your school, inshallah, if that'd be something of interest.
Perhaps, Dr. Amber, you want to speak a moment about this health and wellness from an Islamic perspective, like what age range is it for? Just to get a little information for people who are not familiar with this series and may want to look at it a little bit closer now.
The Health and Wellness book series is geared towards the upper elementary, middle school, and high school. These are the 6 books that you'll see up on the slide here. We did not put particular grades for each level, but they do follow an order of 1 being age appropriate and reading appropriate for the 4th, 5th, 6th grade level, and then they move onward up into level 6, which is more for the high school level. That being said, you know your community best and the issues that maybe you're dealing with your own community. So for some communities, 4 and 5 and 6, which are typically at the high school level, may be more beneficial to you for 7th and 8th graders. So just keeping that in mind. But level book 1 kind of goes into health and nutrition, social health as well, dealing with racism, some of the social health issues that our community deals with. Level 2 is all about puberty. So a lot of what we talked about today is in level 2. Level 3 is on mental health. So there's discussions on self-esteem and social media. Level 4 includes a different array of topics on mental health and illness. There's a social health chapter regarding the view of women in Islam, a spiritual health topic that talks about dealing with nafs and drugs and alcohol. Level 5 is sexual and reproductive health, dealing with sexual desire, dealing with intimacy. A lot of the higher level sex education is occurring in level 5. There's also discussions on dealing with same-sex attraction, the story of Lut alayhi salam, as well as sexual violence. Level 6 goes into marriage, pregnancy, contraception, and abortion. So a lot of higher level topics. So they do grow in terms of the knowledge base based on the age. But that's kind of an array. You can definitely find more information on noorart.com. They can be used in Islamic schools, weekend schools, home schools, between a parent and a child. Alhamdulillah, I teach at several different Islamic schools, and we use the book series. And alhamdulillah, it's so far been a great benefit to our students. But I definitely encourage your feedback as we work to improve the book.
And Dr. Amber, there's a question in the chat from Camila. She's saying, you did mention that every community is different, and when you decide on the depth we could go to when it comes to puberty education, when you have a class and there's a variety of people that are, maybe very ready and not ready at all, what do you do about that? What do you recommend?
Yeah, that's a great question because there is a lot of variation within one class setting. And sometimes with the puberty seminars is they're combining multiple grades in one go. Usually what I like to do is I try to consider the person in the room who may be feeling the most vulnerable with the information. And I like to kind of go at their pace. So for a puberty topic, I'm thinking of the girl in the room I usually teach the females, and then we have a trained male who will teach the males. But I think about the girl in the room who may not have had her period yet, or may not have been given any health education at all at home. And this may be very uncomfortable and a little bit scary. And so I like to go slow and take things in a very simple language. That being said, there will be other students in the room who are going to ask more advanced questions or more explicit questions. This is where I like to use the anonymous question box. Passing out cards, and therefore I can kind of sift and read through the questions and figure out what might be appropriate. If I notice that most of the questions tend to be more higher level than the other ones, then this is usually when I work with the schools about having certain topics being discussed and maybe splitting up by grade level versus combining, because you want to be mindful of those in the room who may not be at that level yet. That being said, there are many people who tend to be quiet and may to have a much greater exposure than they are letting on. But group settings can be a little bit tricky. So therefore, having some type of routine where you know your community and what you think would be appropriate, and then each year kind of building off of that topic. May Allah make it easy, inshallah. It can be very challenging.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Amber. We're at the top of the hour, depending on the time zone. So I know some people, it's dinner time, it's prayer time, it's going to bed time, depending where you are. So thank you so much. Much appreciated. Inshallah, we will be doing more with Dr. Amber in the coming months and years ahead. It's not a one and done, but we're seeing more of her with ISLA. And, check out the great curriculum at Noorart to see if that fits the needs of your school and your community. Definitely much needed curriculum. So thank you. I will be turning off the recording and letting everybody have a wonderful evening. So Jazakallah khairan, Dr. Amber, and everybody here. We will be sending out the recording, and Dr. Amber does some resources she'll be sharing that we will send out to everybody who registered. So thank you, and have a lovely evening.
Jazakumullah khair. Thank you very much.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.